Our purpose today is to discuss how to make your workplaces and buildings safer and healthier. Our guests I will introduce shortly. We've got Asif from Perkins and Wills. I should say Dr. Asif, since very recently. We've got Joanna from Work in Mind, Professor Vorley from Oxford Brookes, and Nick Turner is joining us from HSBC. I'll give them all a chance to introduce themselves shortly. So straight over, and I'll go from left to right. Asif, did you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. My name's Asif Din. I'm Sustainability Director at Perkins and Will. I oversee all of the projects in the office, from corporate interiors to master planning, to make sure that all sustainability aspects are being considered within design.
Morning, Asif, and thank you for joining us.
No problem.
Joanna? I think you're on mute, Joanna.
Apologise. Good morning. I'm Jo from Work in Mind. If you haven't found Work in Mind yet, it's an online platform that we established in 2018, primarily as a social purpose project from my other business, but its focus is entirely on the connection between human mental and physical health and the built environment. So please do take a look afterwards.
Thanks, Joanna. Tim?
Yeah, hi there. Good morning, everyone. My name's Tim Vorley. I'm, as it says there, at Oxford Brookes University. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean in the business school. Any panel needs someone who's only loosely relevant, and that's probably me this morning. But my area of research and interest is very much around business models and business model innovation. And I work quite closely with colleagues at Innovate UK and also within the Department for Business as well around productivity and some of the challenges there. So hopefully I'll be able to bring some of that into the conversation as well.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Nick.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Nick Turner, and I don't have any doctorships or professors. I've got nothing along those lines. I'm the head of facilities management, safety and engineering for HSBC globally. So basically run all the buildings. If anything goes wrong with a branch, data center or an office, and we've got about 40 million square foot of it, it's normally my fault. So it's normally
We'll remember who to blame next time, Nick.
Exactly.
Okay. So then just a little bit about LCMB. We're a business, we're a consultancy business that work with our clients to maximize the positive impact that the workplaces have on the people, the customers and the business themselves. So I'll ask John to introduce himself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm John O'Brien. I'm the founder and MD of LCMB. And back to you, Rudy.
Thank you. Rudy Duplessis, I'm the Director of Operations. Also no doctorates whatsoever. I do have a degree, but that feels like small fry in this present company. So I'll get straight on to what we're trying to do today. Our objective for today is we're looking to share insights and tips on how to make the workplaces healthier, safer and more productive in 2021 and beyond, and post-pandemic. Now, the question mark there is deliberate because we don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. I think we all want it to end very, very shortly, but we're looking to the both immediate future and the longer term future. So with that in mind, I will hand over to John. I will stop sharing the screen in a minute, and John will take us through a Q&A session. If anybody from the audience has a question, please feel free to raise your hand or type it in the meeting chat or anything like that. Thank you very much, and over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. So good morning, everybody. As Rudy said, if you have a question as we go through, please raise your hand and we'll come to you, and we'll allow some time at the end of our discussion to pick up any final questions and answers. So I just want to say good morning to our panel. I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks because I think we've got a really interesting collection of experience with us today. So I've got a couple of questions I'm going to start with. And Nick, I'm going to come to you first. So the first question I guess we have on our mind is, what impact do you think the pandemic has had on the nature of work over the last sort of 12 months? It's almost a year since we've been in lockdown in the UK. And I guess with your experience globally, you may have seen lockdown start earlier.
Yes, I mean, it's quite incredible to think that it's just over a year ago. We got a message from our colleagues in Wuhan at HSBC saying there's a bit of a virus going around. So talk about an understatement. And I mean, we were very fortunate in a way at HSBC to have the lessons learning, the foresight of what they went through in China and Hong Kong and in Asia. Being shared with us here and across our portfolio and how to react. I think what we have seen for sure is a huge investment by organisations in their technology to ensure that people can work from home. And it was a massive scramble by us and many others to get as many as they can. I mean, we got to something like 98% of a 230,000 workforce working from home. And it was a monumental effort. So I think the pandemic has been a real catalyst for change. It was happening and the digital revolution was already there, but it's really sped it up and it's really enhanced that. And I think for me, what the pandemic has shown that you can be productive when you're working from home. And particularly in the banking world, there's a lot of presenteeism and we don't really like to be on the forefront of change. But I think certainly now we have demonstrated that. And you're seeing a lot of this across multiple industries where people are able to say, hey, you know what, we've got our workforce at home. It is working. We've got the technology and we're able to do that. But I do think that also comes with a bit of a spin-off, which I'm sure that we can talk about a bit later. And that is what's the effects that has on people at home and their working from home balance from that perspective. So yes, it's been a huge catalyst for change. I think there will be a permanent shift. It won't be, we will still need an office as well. And, our CEO came out yesterday or Tuesday with the annual results saying we will be reducing our office space. And then you have Goldman's today, the CEO for Goldman's announcing the fact that he expects everybody to come back into the office. So you do have different viewpoints around how it's all going to work from there.
Okay, thank you for that, Nick. So different viewpoints. So moving to yourself, Tim, I think you rather undersold your expertise at the beginning. I know that you've got a specific research and sort of practical interest in productivity. So I'm just interested from your experience, maybe at the university in the higher education sector and more broadly in terms of productivity research, what impact do you think the pandemic has had on the nature of work?
Yeah, well, I think picking up on some of Nick's points there, that it's been absolutely transformative. And I suppose I have a couple of observations, both from my kind of position at the university, but also some of the research that we're undertaking. I think kind of when you think about where universities were as higher education institutions, kind of probably 15 months ago now, on campus, face-to-face delivery was very much the norm for the higher education experience. There are kind of online providers. You would imagine that the likes of the Open University was supremely well placed there, given that very little impact to their kind of operations online and the delivery of online education. But I took the position on at Brookes from the 1st of June last year. And I think if someone had said to me, without the pandemic, go and take your university online, you'd have probably looked at them and said, you're crazy. This is not going to happen. We've got an estate, the kind of realm that we have. This is how we deliver. The reality is that by May, we were online. It wasn't perfect. I think every time we teach, every class, every way that we move forward, it improves. And I think that what it has done, and this kind of relates to some of the things that maybe I've put forward on the research front, there is no bouncing back. There is only bouncing forward. We will never kind of revert to purely being that on like face-to-face campus provider. We need to think how we perpetuate blended learning in a way that will constantly improve and iterate. And I think that the good news is for me that having been handed the challenge of working through COVID and taking on this post in leading the school and contributing to the wider leadership of the university, it's now trying to make sure that we seize that silver lining to the cloud. How do we take the lessons that we've learned and develop them? So from that side of things, the university's perspective, and I guess where I'm at, it kind of comes down to some of the things that Nick said about rethinking how we use our estate, what that looks like. It won't ever be used in quite the same way again. There will obviously be a significant online offer that accompanies our on-campus offer. And that's to say that actually what we should be doing, and this is where my research comes in, it's about developing the business model. It's taking it in new directions that it wasn't before, trying to understand how we relate to the students as consumers and clients, customers, if you like, if we want to talk in those terms, about what they're going to want moving forward. And I think we need to kind of be responsive to that. Through some of the research that I've been doing that's been kind of ongoing through the pandemic and existed prior to it. So, for example, and it's interesting again that the panel that we've got looking at professional services has been one of the key areas, and actually one of the big projects funded under the industrial strategy that I've been involved with has been looking at digitalization, digital transformation of professional services firms. Now, that was all being done very much based in the office. It was about trying to develop the business model, future competitiveness. And through the pandemic, we've continued this work, engaging with a variety of legal and accounting firms, understanding what they're doing and how they're working. Obviously, for some who had that strong digital infrastructure, the pivot to home working was more seamless than in others, where we saw a rapid rollout of different technologies as they were displaced from the office. But I think that what we need to do now is we need to be thinking, when it comes to the future of the office and the future of work more generally, the use of the technology has been used, and a lot of the findings from our research indicate that there's sticky fixes to existing ways of working. And I think fundamentally what we now need to think about is how do we enhance those ways of working rather than simply applying technologies in a retrospective way to perpetuate old ways of working. What does the future way of working using these technologies look like, and what does that mean? And that's absolutely key to the productivity question. Very much thinking about how we can begin to understand what changes are occurring and how we actually use technology to get better outcomes from this, rather than simply thinking, right, well, we used to be in an office, now we're... How do we really pick that up? How do we think about the changes that are in place as a way of being out of the office and making the most of that? So happy to kind of elaborate as we go through, but a kind of a kick-off there in terms of, for me, that there is a huge opportunity around productivity and business models.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I do like the no bouncing back, the bouncing forward. I think that's a great way of summarising where we're going. And Asif, just in terms of the impact of the pandemic on your clients and the practice, what do you see as the nature of the impact on of change and for you guys and your clients?
Right. Well, we were in a reasonably good position when the pandemic, sort of like when lockdown was announced, because we had moved most of our computing system to the cloud. So it was a case that everybody took their laptop home and effectively could plug in and it could start. Finding a place to actually work is a more difficult proposition, especially for our younger staff who effectively were in shared households, using bedrooms, not ideal working conditions at all. And then as we were all online as well, the IT infrastructure, sort of like moving around quite big design files up and down, sort of like uploading and downloading became really quite problematic. And we had to come round and do, as Tim said, sort of almost stick and fix solutions as we move forwards. But, sort of like my role in terms of effectively overseeing projects actually became a lot harder, because rather than having a 5-minute conversation with walking around the office and looking at what people were doing, I had to book in a meeting, make sure that they, sort of like a half an hour. And who had really heard of Zoom before this pandemic? It's sort of like there has been, sort of like a certain amount of different ways of working, but I agree with Tim, it's all been sticky at the moment. Sort of like it's not ideal. I still can't draw properly at home. I still can't do a sketch and then send it to somebody. Yes, I do a sketch, I photograph it, and then I send it on by email, and then I talk somebody through it. But that's not ideal by any sense. In terms of sorry.
Oh, sorry. You carry on, Asif.
I'll carry on going.
Yeah.
In terms of our clients still don't know which way to go. And what actually happened was we had a backlog of work. We reached that backlog, and then effectively we froze, because all of our clients, especially corporate interior clients, will basically say, we don't know what's happening next. Why should I have, sort of like 5,000 square foot office that you want to fit out, and yet we don't know what work looks like? So everybody has been pretty much frozen, and we've been actually providing a range of different flexibility solutions and adaptability, more than we have actually saying, look, you need this sit-stand desk, this sort of furniture, this sort of work setting. It has become a lot more what happened previously in terms of hot desking, in terms of adaptability of workspace. That has been accelerated so that you basically have a canvas of an office that you can reconfigure in a range of different ways.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Asif. And Joe, I guess you're looking, you've got experience of clients you work with on the communication front, but equally you're looking across the whole environment, I guess nationally and globally through Work in Mind. Have you seen any sort of themes either in the UK or in other countries in terms of the impact that the pandemic has had on the nature of work?
Well, obviously, I mean, there's the sort of topics that we're covering on Work in Mind seem to be massively shifted. So if I get one more piece of content about hybrid working models, I think I might cry or, stick my head in a pillow or something. So the hybrid working models thing is on everyone's lips, which of course it wasn't. I think the other thing is the sort of things that people are frightened of and the things that people are worried about. For me, the thing that I'm personally very interested in, and the thing that I'm seeing, I think we need more answers to. And I think, John, in your sort of day job, it's people like you that have the answers. But is reoccupation. And how do you what can you do to support that sense of feeling safe? Feeling something is not necessarily, it's almost an intangible, isn't it? Will a sticker on a wall that says we've achieved a certain level of air quality, standard or whatever, will that do it? Is it that we need, I don't know, different lighting, different paint colours in a room to make people feel emotionally more connected to a space and safer in it? I think there's a massive thing around that, and I see an enormous amount of survey data that's coming through. Some of it is not great quality. It's your classic PR stuff, 1,500 top companies surveyed say, and I always include on Work in Mind, we always include the survey methodology so that people can see whether, how good it is. But the surveys coming through kind of look at, the fear factors, the things people worry about, and also the mental impact, which I think is absolutely horrific and extremely frightening. Yeah. And that is, to my mind, is going to be the pandemic that we're facing on the very long term. And I think that it's interesting because that is something that we will have to think about from a built environment perspective moving forward, and home working won't be the answer necessarily, will it? But a whole mix of things. So yeah, a lot of stuff in there, really, John.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Nick, I guess you've got a view in the UK and broadly, almost, I guess, at a global level, as workplaces, as people return to the workplaces, which I guess is happening at different rates in different parts of the world. What are you seeing as the sort of short-term changes, and what do you think the likely long-term impact will be in terms of the workplace and real estate?
Yeah, you're right, John. So obviously some countries have been able to lock down effectively and they've been able to return to work. Places like Hong Kong and even Dubai and places like that, we haven't seen a huge rush back to the office. So we have been working through in the UK specifically what's our return to work programme, linking that in with the UK government's phasing. And again, I'm not anticipating in the UK everybody rushing back to work. There's going to be different reasons, different roles, many different roles, even within a bank, that they don't need to come back into the office as quickly as maybe some other roles may need to. So to your point, I don't anticipate a huge rush back. We have seen different behaviours in the office. We obviously have a COVID safe workplace like everybody else. I am seeing, strangely enough, an adherence to those rules by bankers, not often renowned, but we have followed those rules. If you follow the press, we have been following them, and there's kind of, you know, an acceptance that this is what they have to do in order to be back in the workplace. We have seen some definite changes, which I think will be a bit more short-term, long to mid-term, in eating habits in those countries that have returned. There's no more of these buffet style, help yourself to food. People do want to come into the workplace. They don't want to leave the workplace. So we've been advocating the use of food ordering apps. The food can be delivered to your desk, which goes against the well-being side. You want to get up and get away, but we want to minimize people moving around the building. So we're actually having the food delivered to people, but they can order it on their app. They know exactly what they can have. It's all pre-packaged and it gets delivered to them. So there's going to be these definitive changes. And if you actually go into London, I've been in a few times to Canary Wharf, a lot of the food places have shut, a lot of the shopping places, and they're not just shut, they're permanently closed, they're out of business. So the choice for staff when they do come back to the workplace is going to be very different. The environment when they come in, it's not, you know, we talk about mental well-being, and Joe, I absolutely agree with you. The impact of mental wellness, as well as non-communicable diseases, has not really been factored in yet. But people think, oh, I need to go into the workplace for my mental well-being. It's very different. You are walking in, even just the entrance that you normally used might not be the normal entrance. You've got to wear a face mask. You've got to maintain social distancing. You're going to be in an office where you could potentially be the only person on the floor because, you know, the nature of the workplace at the moment. So I think all of these things need to be factored into in terms of that return. Each office and business is going to be different, and each individual is going to be different. And I would also want to pick up on what Joe said about surveys. I think it's really important for employers to ask their employees, what is it you need? And it's almost going to be a case-by-case basis as to whether they return to work or not. You don't know whether their household might have a vulnerable person at work, at home. You don't know whether they may have experienced long COVID. You just don't know what their circumstances are in terms of their commute. Do they want to go on public transport? So all these sorts of things, and surveys cannot be just taken at a generic level. It's going to be up to the line managers with education to those line managers as to how you manage that return to work. And each business is going to have to tailor it and really think about how they're actually going to reactivate the workplace. Just some ideas.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Some great ideas in there. Asif, you indicated when we spoke last that your clients were struggling with what they do next in terms of office fit out configuration. As people sort of return to the workplace and are preparing for the return to the workplace, are you seeing any short and longer term themes emerge?
There's extremes. Let's talk about the extremes. The extremes are effectively the need effectively for cellular spaces again. So, you know, we've spent, well, probably the last 15 years trying to organize effectively the open plan office and adaptability. And now everybody's, you know, sort of like flip-flopped all the way to the other side. And basically we want small rooms, individual pods effectively for people so they're protected. And at the other extreme, we've basically got nobody's coming into the office unless they want to socialize. So effectively that would create a prevalence effectively of the office as a meeting room. So you have a range of different meeting rooms, no matter what the density would be, but there would always be pressures on using meeting rooms as effectively joint working spaces for team working. So those are the two extremes, and it's kind of difficult to actually navigate between the two. But it's going to be a mix of everything, it seems. You know, sort of like, I think most people and most workspaces now recognize that not everybody's going to be back at the office. It is going to be lower density. They'll be going to the office for a reason. They won't be going to the office to do another Zoom meeting or another Teams meeting. It will be that they'll be doing it because they need to get some other value out of that.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
And Asif, that sort of move from open plan to setting your offers, is that something you're seeing just in the UK or outside the UK? Is it a sort of theme that's, UK centric or not?
It's more that it's been muted in terms of UK and Europe at the moment. In the US, I don't think they're there yet, to be quite honest. They're sort of like, they're still thinking effectively, no, we can hold off. And I think in some ways, the US is actually behind the UK and Europe in terms of thinking, what do we do next? They're almost in the paralyzed static phase. And yet we are sort of like looking forwards and saying, no, we need to get back. How do we get back?
I guess, I don't know. I'm just guessing that the UK is probably ahead of the States in terms of vaccination program, but because it's, I think it's one of the sort of behind Israel and there's one other country. We're coming third, I think, in terms of vaccination, aren't we? So we're slightly ahead. Yeah.
But it's sort of like even now, if you talk about clients and you basically say, sort of like, what's your feeling on, say, occupancy density within a passport-rich work environment? Or, sort of like, and people don't know. And, that's one of the big questions. At the moment, I think we're still going ahead with a lower density. Whether that's a lower density as what we had in terms of 6 months ago, I don't know.
I mean, that's a really interesting question that we could probably debate another time, because I've seen the UK government have said, whilst the adult population will be vaccinated by the end of the summer, they don't expect to be able to remove social distancing in entirety until the end of 2022, which is almost like a contradictory question, but leads you to sort of think about density in offices.
So you're still going to have blank office desk spaces, basically, where people can't sit. You're also going to have lower density meeting rooms and other things with maximum occupancy.
Yeah, but it sounds like we're perhaps going to have the pre-existing space to be able to cope with that based on how the space is going to be utilised potentially. And
yes.
And Joe, from your point of view, are you seeing any sort of themes emerge as people return to the office, either in the short term or longer term, from the material on Work in Mind or your work with?
Well, I think I should probably go back to my previous point, Your Honour. I think the stuff that we're seeing really it keeps shifting with the changes to the lockdowns and what's required. But I think we were getting to a point where reoccupation was absolutely the sort of the topic du jour, and of course now I think it's about the much longer term impacts and what that looks like. And because Work in Mind talks to all parts of the sort of built environment supply chain, we try to kind of encourage that sort of, it's people like, there's my dog here, people like Nick at one end, but also people like Asif and his team at the other. I think there's different groups, different stakeholders have sort of different perspectives. I think the big thing, and I think there are people in the States like Joseph Allen, the professor at Harvard, who are very good at this. But to me, the big conversation needs to be around air quality. And I keep going back to that. But I listened yesterday to some excellent talks at the ASBP's conference, the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. And there was Professor Catherine Noakes talking, and some excellent talk there, but exactly on this topic of air quality and what we should understand. And I think that's going to have to be something that the HR director understands, the FM director, the buildings team, the architect, everybody. And we need to understand that, because people are going to be so frightened, I think, and they're not going to feel comfortable about being back until those sort of senses of safety are sort of resolved. I think it's a huge topic, and I'm not the expert. I'm just the curator on that, but it's certainly something I see a lot of. Yeah,
I guess so. You're seeing a need to think about that issue of giving people comfort, that their health and well-being is taken care of in terms of return.
Totally. I think it's up to all of us who are involved, whether it's all of us on this panel and probably a lot of people listening, to think about how do you make somebody feel secure and safe? You know, is it all about certifications? Is it about pieces of paper? Or is it about physical things, or is it about environmental things or psychological things? I think there's a whole load of stuff that's going to have to come together, because what will happen, I suspect, is that we will slowly return to our desks, whether it's on the hybrid model or not. But will we feel productive whilst we're, or are we going to be sitting terrified, actually, that going and having standing by the water cooler and leaning against it and, you know, touching the meeting door handles, you know, is going to result in a problem if, I don't know, 75% of us are vaccinated. I don't know, but I can see this sort of building up in some of the content and the articles that we've published, and I see it on a lot of these webinars. It's a recurring theme for sure.
Okay, thank you, Jo. And Tim, from your point of view, do you think you'll be able to get the academic staff and students back to campus? And are you seeing any short or long-term change?
Yeah, well, I say one of the things that's important to note is that students are on campus. The reality is that campuses are open, even within the current government guidelines, when it comes to those that have essential aspects of their degree where they need to be on campus. That is actually already the case. From March the 8th, there will be an increase of the number of students going back to campus, again, coordinating this with government guidelines, and they are obviously subject to change, but our briefings with the minister have been that is the case, and that we need to think about what that means for, again, the use of the estate, the social distancing, but where there is a requirement to use specialist facilities. Like many businesses that still continue to be in business, it is not that the workplace has kind of shut down and that it has changed. The nature and the use of the workspace has changed. But we have continued to operate, as have many other businesses in many other industries. And I think that the key thing for us is making sure that it is and it remains COVID secure. So kind of picking up on kind of Joe's point and what that means. Obviously, there are multiple ongoing and repeat risk assessments that are being carried out by occupational health as those different parts of our estate are opened up and as we come to use them differently. And we also need to ensure that the people on campus adhere to what the social distancing measures are. And like we've said, that they're going to be in place beyond the return to work and the opening up in different ways that are going to affect us. When it comes to staff, and it was interesting that kind of Nick's point that actually people won't go into the office for Zoom. One of the measures taken early on in Brooks was that even if we were going onto campus and if you were to have a meeting, the meeting had to be held on Zoom because we couldn't, within the social distancing, adhere to this. So I think it is thinking about the changes that are going to be that were short-term responses to COVID and the transmission of COVID-19 and coronavirus, but actually what we will take forward. A useful point to plug, I don't expect anyone to read it, but we wrote a book on productivity in the pandemic. Now, it covers a whole raft of themes that are from mental health and the future of work to innovation in the workplace to all of these types of things and what that means for organisations, policymakers, etc. But I think that we need to think of it in the round. It's impossible just to think about the future of the workplace and what the estate of an organisation might look like without actually thinking about what are the fundamental changes that we've made to wellbeing policies within the organisation. Because, again, like Nick said, getting food delivered to a desk is great on one hand. It's going to fundamentally change how we as individuals engage with the kind of retail hospitality sector and other things. But I think it is really trying to kind of think about this in a systems-based way. Organisations are part of systems. We need to think about how those systems work and where they're interdependent, both within organisations, but actually across organisations. So I think Canary Wharf, and a lot of the time, given the work that I've been doing with professional services firms, I find myself in the city. It's like a ghost town last time I went down there. But the answer is not going to be led by HSBC or Goldman or whoever else. We need to rethink how that system works. And actually, that is about trying to change that relationship and those dynamics and bringing in people with other expertise that can say, if we are going to be working at a distance, and I have sympathy kind of with that kind of constant reference to hybrid working and blended work, like it is something that has become as prevalent as the word pivot or agile. And I think the answer is not to be pivot and agile, but it's to try and find what works for organizations. But more than that, for the employees of these organizations. And I think one of the big things that I see on the kind of productivity side is the businesses that we're talking about and their productivity and future competitiveness is about their people. And what we really need to do is to make sure we're empowering those individuals in their roles, while also, and I come right back to one of the things that kind of Nick said early on about the use of technology changing. Well, their roles are changing. This isn't just you're now working remotely. The tasks that you do and how you do those tasks are changing because of the way that we're using technology. So I definitely think there is reason to be optimistic here, and with all the kind of compounding challenges of Brexit and so on and so forth. But it is about trying to kind of have the leaders in organizations step back and think about the future of those organizations. And it's not a case of perpetuating business as usual is enough.
Okay, thank you, Tim. You flashed up your book there very quickly. So what we'll do for people who attend today is we'll get the reference and link to that book in the notes and follow-up info so people can access it. Just pulling out from the conversation, I think we're sort of suggesting that people's mental well-being, that their health and well-being is a topic that perhaps has come to the fore. Joe mentioned Professor Joseph Allen, who's one of the leaders in the States in this space in terms of the impact of workplace on performance, productivity, health, well-being, and I guess I've got a question for Nick. In terms of the work that you're doing in managing that real estate at a global level, Nick, are you seeing healthy buildings coming to the fore? Because there's a theme with UK GBC and associations like that, where they're starting to move from sustainability as an issue to healthy buildings, either as a sort of global issue or a sub-issue of sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I haven't got a book to plug, and I have heard Joe Allen speak personally. He's fantastic, right? Last year I was really proud that we'd started an indoor air quality pilot studies in London, Mumbai, and Beijing. And of course, those cities' air qualities plummeted, or they improved, right? So I had to suspend the pilot study to look at the productivity. So we're going to have to resurrect those studies. Yes, I've heard of well-building, and I've had them present to us on a number of occasions. And I think what we need to do as an organisation, and this is where I think some of our clients will be in other organisations, if you think about what you've got already, if you look at your suppliers, you've already got probably really good suppliers. You need to look in with those guys. If you're using companies like Interface and people like that, all different companies, they'll all have their own bits. So you need to tug in. What are they doing? What am I doing with my existing global engineering standards, to Joe's point? And, am I just meeting the bare minimum for air quality and number of air changes? What am I doing for lighting? And when I think organizations start pulling together all the different bits that they're already doing, then they may start being able to build a story that they can then give to their staff. Yes, well-building may come in and they'll do stuff like that for all that kind of pieces and pulling it all together. But I think organizations need to start thinking, what are all the different aspects that we're doing from a sustainability point of view? What are we doing in terms of supply chain management? What are we doing in terms of, even the food offerings, all the different aspects, and start communicating the story of what you're already doing. Listening also to the staff, what is concerning them, and actually what do I need to adjust particularly? I know that my technology is going to have to compete with the home. Joe's got her little doggy in the background. Her little doggy is not going to be able to come to an HSBC office that's 42 stories, right? Don't worry, I've had all that. Unless it's an assisted dog. I think from our point of view, you've got to start thinking, right, okay, the workplace is now competing with the home environment. And therefore, people are going to say, right, do I need to go in? What am I going to go in for? And is it going to work for me when I go in? And therefore, you do need, I think, as employers, need to start telling people all of the different aspects that we're doing. And again, I like Tim's bit, not bouncing back. I'm also responsible for our carbon net zero, our sustainability. My waste tables, I built a waste league table, has plummeted. It's brilliant. Nobody's producing any waste unless you're in a branch. So for us, it's been fantastic. And I want to try and keep some of that. Let's take some of these best lessons learned. People have learned how not to print. They don't need to print. They can't physically print at home. Who are they going to give it to? So for us, we need to maintain some of these behaviours going forward. And I think that's going to be the challenge for us in real estate, in workplace, is to keep some of those great behaviours and maintain them going forward as well in the workplace.
Thank you, Nick. And Asif, from your point of view, I know that you lead on sustainability for Perkins and Wills. So do you see healthy buildings being a subset of sustainability, or ultimately sustainability being a subset of healthy buildings?
I'll become slightly controversial. I'd say probably sustainability is dying.
Okay.
In that sort of sense, because it is becoming more about environmental multivalency. It's about thinking about a range of different things. It's going back to what Tim said. It's more systemic than that. It's actually choosing the right thing for the right job. Now, in terms of empowering the workplace, empowering people in the workplace, it's done by two main means. It's done by control and transparency. So telling them what they got around them, so they know what's actually happening, and also giving them the control to change it. Now, as Nick said, that has got to be overlaid with a narrative to make sure that they actually understand what's going on. But it's not going to be about chasing points anymore. It's not going to be about what certificate you have on the wall. It'll be using the KPIs, the tools that those certifications actually have, and then picking and choosing what's right for your organization, and then using them as a jigsaw puzzle to actually create a healthier building. Sort of like going back to sort of like social, economic, environmental, all of those aspects, and making sure that they actually work in a systemic way, as opposed to just chasing one metric, which may be carbon.
Okay, thank you, Asif. And Tim, in terms of healthy buildings, healthy campuses, presumably sort of mental and physical well-being of students has a big part to play in terms of student experience. Have you seen a change at campus level?
I think in some ways the ways that we use the campus has understandably changed as a result of COVID. And I mean, coming back to what Joe said, we've probably got more than enough signs, arrows, and where you can do, what you can't do, and where you need to make sure you're sanitizing. But the use of the estate moving forward, I think there's some big kind of questions about what we do, and both in terms of the kind of estate for teaching, but also thinking about what that means for the student experience around accommodation in the short term. We've sought to try and put measures in place to support student mental health, to try and empower connectedness of communities virtually, about how we can make sure that we don't see people isolated, both staff and the students. I think probably since I've joined, I've had more all-school meetings and one-to-ones virtually than I ever would have done if we were in person. But part of that is about building and connecting with employees around the place. And so how do we do that is absolutely key for them understanding that we are continuing to work through the pandemic and making sure we're listening to what's working and not. And I think the next stage is then taking that into the development of the estate. So taking the point that kind of Nick's made, and both Asif made as well, in terms of going back to the office, it's got to be about, for me, more than simply that socialization space. But if we can change the density at which we work, that might not mean that we need kind of more space to perpetuate existing ways of working, but how can we repurpose spaces? So one of the things as part of the planning round that the university goes through annually this year that's been quite different is to try and say, how can we change that looking forward in terms of our estates plans? Do we need to rethink what's there, how we do this and what we build next? And also how we change the spaces that we've got. And I think that also, and this is where it does come back to me for the business model, it's trying to think about how the estate relates to other parts of the business. So whereas all of our business would have been done in classrooms and lecture theatres, if we're moving some of that online, it brings with it opportunities to think about reproductizing what we've got, putting it back out there in different ways. And I feel like I'm on a sales pitch, but one of the things that I'm really keen to do, and if anyone wants to have a conversation afterwards, by the work we did with Innovate UK, we've developed a business model innovation toolkit. I know that you've seen it before, John. If anyone wants to reach out, happy, there's no charge. We can send copies of them. have a play with them and come back to us. And it's about thinking about the change around buildings, sustainability, in terms of that wider business model for me. I don't know that sustainability is dead, a bold statement that I wouldn't have dared make, but I think that it is that systemic piece. How do you bring it together? How do you make the most of this? And actually, it's that level of innovation, that level of thinking that we want firms to be able to respond to and pick up if they're going to be competitive moving forward.
Thank you, Tim. So, Joe, sustainability is dead. Long live sustainability. Is it being overtaken by healthy buildings?
Oh, cheers. Thanks very much for that. Well, I'm not sure I'd have quite been able to come up with that one, but I think I sort of see it more as the natural next step. You know, I mean, the reason that I set up Work in Mind was because in my other life, I run a communications business and marketing communications, and we specialise in the built environment and energy. And I was extraordinarily frustrated with the lack of outlets to share content that talked about tools and technologies and techniques and stuff that could deliver sustainability outcomes, so particularly energy reduction, which is a particular area of interest. But when I looked at that and I thought, you know, all of this stuff, if you've got LED lighting, you get your 40% carbon reduction, electricity reduction. But you know what, there's also less headaches for the teacher who's trying to teach in a classroom, for the child that's not having lights flickering all over them all day that are horrible, you know, incandescence and what have you, and fluorescence. That kid has better learning outcomes because the child is more focused, more concentrated. The teacher is less stressed during the day. Perhaps that could have an impact on kind of working practices for that teacher. So that kind of human element, the human side outcome of sustainability investments, to me is they're absolutely connected. And I find it very odd that certainly in the UK that there is not enough, certainly with the media, should we say, some of them, there is not enough talk about that kind of connection. And that's why we I did what I did with Work in Mind and why we exist. But I think that these conversations are so important. We've had some amazing comments which I've been writing down. But these conversations are so important because it makes those connections, and we need to help the end users to people in industry to see that too.
Okay, thank you, Joe. This is a conversation I could continue all day, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to close with sort of two questions, just getting some practical thoughts or insights that you guys would have for the people on the webinar today. And I'm going to start with the least controversial of my questions, and I'm going to pitch this to Tim first. So if we look at the UK's productivity, Tim, it's been dormant for the last decade, as typically we're producing a third less output than German, US and French workers. So what practical things can we do in the workplace to reverse that trend over the next 10 years and make UK PLC the most productive country in the world?
If I knew that, I'd probably be a consultant, not an academic. But I think in all seriousness, one of the big challenges that I think we have is to kind of make sure that we're focusing on the right things. And actually, we know some of the kind of key underlying drivers of productivity that relate to skills, that they relate to infrastructure, they relate to these kind of big areas that are not quick wins that we need to think about in a digital age that are different. I would say that obviously some of the ways that we look at and we understand productivity, and there's a whole raft of experts that have really kind of looked into the nature of intangibles and actually trying to understand what it is that we're measuring and how we're actually kind of trying to put our focus on the right things moving forward. I guess at a business level, and trying to kind of think for me what the differences are, it's about innovation and embracing innovation. And there's been lots through the pandemic, which has actually come to say, should we be focusing on productivity, or do we need to kind of put that focus back on innovation at a firm level to really drive the competitiveness and productivity of our businesses moving forward in UK PLC? So I think for me, one of the big things that I see, I know it is one of the challenges that's high on the radar of government and certainly kind of with Innovate UK, making additional funding available during the pandemic for a wide range of organisations that wouldn't have otherwise been funded, trying to think about how we can embrace and better utilise technology within work. And actually, we are talking about the workplace and about buildings here, but I think one of the key things is the future of work is changing. And actually, we need to think about the kinds of jobs, the kinds of employees that we need, their careers and their trajectories, and how innovation enhances what they do and the value of what they do, rather than trying to see AI or whatever it might be as taking away jobs. It's about that enhancing and augmenting roles, which really creates value, and then will come through in the productivity statistics.
Thank you, Tim. And Nick, I mean, what do you think we need to do in the UK to reverse this trend and get our productivity back to a global level?
I always have a bit of a problem with productivity and how you define it. I think for us, I think just basically creating the right environment for our employees to thrive, everything that we've said, right? And to do that, it's going to be, I think, understanding their needs, their individual needs, creating a workplace that's seamless to what we've already talked about with technology, the advent of technology, feedback from data that you can get from that technology as to how you can make it easier for people to work. And also, don't just technology for technology's sake. There's always this danger that there's so much going on and it's such an evolving area. You need to be able to develop the technology that really make an impact, I think, on someone's ability to work in the workplace. I think also when we do come back, there's going to be this drive for identity. So when you do come back, we've all been kind of surviving on cultures of our corporations based on what we already had and the relationships we had before we went into lockdown. I think when we come back, that's going to have to resume. And there's one thing that the Brits are really good at. It's actually getting a driving culture, normally in the pub. But at the end of the day, I think we're very social and we will get back. And I think that cultural element will also be driven in the workplace as well. Okay, thank you, Nick. And Asif, do you have some tips for improving our productivity?
I don't know, because it's actually straying into an area that I don't know that much about, and I'll be first to. But if I was to give an opinion, the UK is based on effectively a service economy. And compared to other economies where productivity is more aligned effectively to industrial, on how much people actually use. In terms of the pandemic, we are actually seeing that there's going to be shorter supply chains. So hopefully the UK will actually go up in productivity, but that's just a guess. I don't quite know because I don't quite know the mechanics. One of the things that's just been an interesting thing is over the pandemic, sort of like you look at something like the construction waste industry. Previously, 98% of waste was diverted from landfill. And most of that was actually recycled. Now, effectively, more than half of that is energy to waste. So it's effectively just burnt. It's not recycled anymore because the supply chain is no longer there. If that supply chain can be brought in a shorter time, in a shorter distance, a shorter period, then effectively we'll do better for the environment and we'll do better for productivity. Okay, thank you, Asif. And Joe, maybe a couple of words because I'm going to have to draw us to a close shortly. You're on mute, Joe.
Yes, I was just worried. I'll be quick. I mean, I think my sort of feeling is that the emotional side of things needs to be handled. If people aren't happy, if people aren't feeling comfortable, if people don't feel safe, they will not be productive or in any shape or form. And I think we have to pay a lot of attention to that. And I think that I sincerely hope that HR professionals and people management professionals are really looking to connect with people like Nick and his peers, really, so that there's a connection and we understand that how those two sides can kind of work together to support people. Otherwise, it'll be very tough.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So what I'm going to do is just try and draw out from the conversation a couple of points that I would summarise as takeaway points for people today. So I think based on what we've said, what's coming through strong and loud for me is really taking the time to speak to survey staff who are going back to work to understand what their concerns are, how to make them comfortable, how to deal with the health and well-being, ensuring that we've got the technological and basic processes in place to make them comfortable and make them able to function and work in the workplace, and think about what you do differently in the workplace to what you do at home and what the purpose of coming to the workplace is. And then, as Joe said, there's a lot we can do to make the workplace healthier and better performing in terms of air quality and the like. So before I hand back to Rudy to sort of sum up and thank our panelists, is there anything anybody would like to add to that advice that I've pulled out? Is there any one thing that any of our guest panelists would like to add to that sort of summary? I'm seeing lots of agreement. So I'm going to say thank you to Nick, Tim, Joe, and Asif, and I'm going to hand back to Rudy to close out the session today.
Thank you, John, and thanks to all our panelists. I think that was a fascinating discussion. There's a really good flow of question and answer going on in the chat if anybody wants to have a look. So we've run out of time for open questions, unfortunately. So all that remains for me is to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight. It's been a fascinating discussion and a lot of talking points for me. The one that's going to stick with me is bouncing forward, and I'm going to steal that, Tim. So if anybody hears me say that, that's my idea, and Tim's licensed it to me. Thank you very much. So in terms of follow-up, as John said at the start, we are recording this discussion. We will be making it available. So if anybody wants to revisit it, if you want to know more about LCMB or want to download any of our guidance or anything like that, the contact details are on screen. Have a look at our website. And then last but not least, a date for the diary for next month. Thursday, the 25th of March, we're discussing the route to net zero carbon. And the speakers will include Kieran from BIS, Sam Thomas from CDC, and Tom from the Low Carbon Oxford. So thank you very much, everybody. I wish you a good day, week, month, rest of lockdown, and hope to see you next month. Thank you very much.